Yo, how are we doing, everybody? So today I'm doing a guide on the boss fight versus Edna. So this boss is very complicated. There's a lot of information I need to impart to you guys. So I'm going to be skimming over some things that you can just pause and look at yourself, but let's try to keep this quick. So don't use physical attacks. Performing buffs is something you should only do if you have to, and inflicting status ailments isn't the greatest idea, I don't think. Contagion and Poison do both work on this boss and can be useful, but you might kill yourself going for those, so do be careful. Now, for this boss fight, defaulting early on in the first phase is very strong, as Vortices is a wind-based element attack, and as long as you have proper equipment on, you do not need to worry about taking any wind damage. The equipment wearing as well will help us so that we cannot be slowed and we cannot be silenced. This is very important, as she will be using those a lot, like right here with Soaring Flourish. That move will be slowing you, it will take away any spells you have, it just mass dispels all buffs, and then also it casts haste on the boss. And then Silent Storm that she just used there, it is a AE attack, it is physically based, and it will silence you if you are not wearing gear that allows you to be immune to silence. The good thing with using Bastion, as you can see I'm using 3 Bastions here, is that they have the ability Rampart. Rampart can block the Silent Strike. While it prevents the damage, it does not prevent the silence, so again, you do need to be wearing gear that prevents you from being silenced. The Rampart also will just help with the physical attacks, but essentially the first phase of this fight is not really too crazy. We just need to make sure we're taking advantage of how easy this phase is compared to the others. So you're going to be charging up a lot of BP. I use the Pictomancer here. That's going to reduce this boss's magical defense. Right there you can see minus 35%. And it is countering these debuffs and giving itself haste. But this boss is going to continuously haste itself anyways, so I don't think it's too big of a deal. As long as you yourself are immune to silence, you can use as many debuffs as you want. This boss doesn't gain extra BP for magical attacks, but it has really high magical defense. So I think having Pictomancer is very important. If you are using a physical attacker instead, you'll definitely be having some trouble, as the boss will just take so many more turns and destroy you with its AE attacks. The magic critical ability that you get from Red Mage I think is very important. And yeah, right here, you go immediately into phase 2. There's no prompts like there are for other boss fights. Once the boss gets to about 70% HP, 135k, yeah, its attack pattern changes. It gets a new counter attack, so you have to be careful if you are trying to heal. The boss might just immediately get rid of all your buffs when you do that, and then also inflict you with not status, but elemental drops. Like, you will be more vulnerable to fire, lightning, wind, etc. It's random on which ones you get, and especially we don't want to see the wind one go down, because we want to be able to heal from the wind-based attacks. But it's entirely random, it can't be helped. Though also going into the second phase, the boss is going to start using that Silent Strike more often. So you need to be very careful about that, or the Silent Storm, excuse me. So when they're using that, you're going to take a lot of damage, so instead of just defaulting the entire time like you were in Phase 1, in Phase 2, you want to be putting down more Ramparts. Those Ramparts will be helping your healer so that you don't have to worry too much about healing everyone. For me, I'm using White Mage subbing Spirit Master. They're wearing the same gear as all my Bastions here, which is very, very heavy, and probably isn't the most optimal compared to what the healer would normally go for, just boosting their restoration. But honestly, I feel like the healing and MP is more than good enough, so I feel like the resistances are more important. And having that Spirit Master ability to not die when I have above critical HP is very useful. Now right here, we are going to phase 3. That one does have a cutscene. The third phase is absolutely so much more difficult than the earlier ones. The boss will now counter magical attacks, which is the main way to fight this boss. They're going to use Silent Storm every time you hit, well, not every time, but they have a high chance of hitting you if you do a magical attack. And they start using Ultra Flare. which is going to do so much damage. And this one isn't physical, instead this one is magical. So if you want to use a Bastion ability to block it, you have to use Valation. Don't use Valation like I did here. This is just an example of how to play this poorly. Don't use Valation immediately after. More than likely you'll get hit by Silent Storm after. Because the boss will usually build up the 3 BP, do their massive attack string, then they'll do the Ultra Flare, then they'll do the Silent Storm. So you want to go into Valation, and then you want to go into Rampart. It's not guaranteed. Sometimes there will be multiple Ultra Flares in a row, but more than likely it'll be an Ultra Flare into a Silent Storm once you're in the 3rd phase. So in the 2nd phase, lots of Ramparts. 3rd phase, Valation, then Rampart. You got to make sure you're doing it in the right order. And again, do be very careful whenever you heal, because healing will get that other counter, the Apoplexy, and that'll destroy your buffs, your Ramparts, your Valations, they'll just be gone. Personally, I try to make sure everyone on my team is defaulting as we're going into the boss about to hit 3 BP. If I see them on 2 BP, I'm just going to default with everyone, because the boss will almost always go from 2 BP to 3 DP just with the default, and then immediately go into a very long block string. So you have to be very wary of that. And then also don't worry about putting up Rampart or Valation if the boss is about to hit 3 BP, because when they do their full attack string, Edna will always use Apoplexy first, which gets rid of all of your buffs. So it doesn't matter if you have Rampart or the Valation, they will just be removed. Using the White Mage's super special attack right there, very, very useful. You can get everyone's HP up really, really high, so if you ever make any mistakes, you get hit by too many Ultra Flares, that's a good way to be able to heal without actually activating the boss's Apoplexy. So, that word's so hard. But so you can actually keep your Ramparts up. And then, yeah, again, make sure that you're throwing up those Ramparts before you attack with magical attacks. Because, yeah, you want to get as much damage as you can in the final phases, because the boss is just going to really try to burn you down with these Ultra Flares. But at the same time, if you attack too much with your own magic, you might end up killing your own team as the boss continuously hits you with Silent Storm. If you use the Bastion special, you can also be immune to either Ultra Flare or Silent Storm. You don't have to guess if it's the physical spell or if it's the magical one. Either way, you can block both. So do be aware of that. If you're in a tricky situation, you're not sure what the boss is going to do, you can just use that special if you built it up. This fight is very, very tough on your MP, so having a lot of ethers is very useful. You know, there's that Spirited Defense keeping my White Mage alive, very, very useful. And then also using the Spirit Bringer, the Spirit Master ability, that can also be getting your entire team like MP every single turn, as this fight is very, very difficult. For me, this took me about like 40 minutes using this strategy, though again, I'm doing this slightly under-leveled, and I'm also doing this on hard, so it might be much faster for you if you are not under-leveled and you're doing this on normal or easy difficulty. Once the boss gets really, really low, again, it's just very important you want to Rampart first. Even if the boss doesn't necessarily Silent Storm in retaliation, you will be able to go into the next magical attack without immediately putting up the next Rampart. You just want to play it safe, and as you can see right there, it is going to come out. And Adele takes the full damage, because while she did use the Rampart is a buff itself, and that is going to trigger the Soaring Flourish, which does a Mass Dispel, get rid of any buffs that that target has, so Adele did lose that there. Now, right here, I'm trying to use the Valation here. The boss just used its 3 BP, so I'm assuming it's going to use Ultra Flare, and there indeed is the Ultra Flare. I just saved my team's life. I was definitely going to lose the game right there. I was going to get the game over. So, carefully realizing where the boss is going to use Ultra Flare or Silent Storm is integral to doing this third and final phase. So, be very, very wary going into that. And again, try to have as much BP and your MP as high as you can going into the final phase, because the damage the boss throws out is obscene. And then yeah, right here, we're going to hit with this final Thundaga, and there we go, the boss is going to drop. So I'm going to edit this section right here, because I don't want to spoil anything for anybody. But yeah, that is the boss fight. If you have any questions, please feel free to ask. This is very difficult so don't be ashamed if you have trouble. Either way, that's going to be me. Peace, guys. I'll see y'all later.